My first question would be, as a Fulbright professor,
Mm-hmm.
why did you come to Hungary and why did you choose Széchenyi István University specifically, about which we are truly honored?
So I chose Hungary, I guess principally because I had heard of Zalazán, the facility, and the members of Zalazán had visited Florida, so that caused my interest. It became very interesting, and then I found out the connection between Zalazán and the university. And then I looked at the university a little bit, and that I found that interesting. It's an up-and-coming university. That's always very interesting. So those were the reasons. And I knew nothing about Hungary really, and so it was an opportunity for exploration, which is always exciting.
Okay, and what did you explore?
Well, everything. So of course we've explored how the university works and the academic departments in the university, especially the ones that I'm working with the Vehicle Research Center and the Audi faculty. I've explored the area quite a bit. I've been to Budapest many times, and especially the Fulbright folks have arranged many cultural opportunities. So many dimensions of exploration.
Actually, this is why I'm asking, to be very upfront. I would like to ask about the similarities and the differences between academia in the US and Hungary, and also the operational structures, because as you said, you explored the organizational chart of our university, the operational mechanisms of our university. Now I should like to ask you about the similarities and the differences between the two systems.
Well, the U.S. has, as we've discussed, sort of parallel many structures. It has private structures and public structures and sort of old, Ivy League structures and so on. And I think from what I've seen in Hungary, of course, it's primarily a public structure, and it's a public structure that. Of course, some aspects are quite old, especially the older universities in Budapest, and then some are new, and especially the polytechnics are new. So I think the similarities are that there are educational institutions, especially in the technology areas, that are trying to grow, trying to drive economic development, which is very important for the country. And that's the same in the U.S. The difference is that in the U.S. There's such a large variety, right? There's a large variety of institutions. There's a large, and they're historic. Some of them have large, well-established programs that have existed over many years. So to me, it's a sort of the things that are going on in Hungary are very important in the sense that they probably form the next generation of the kind of institutions. I think one of the interesting things, especially for this university, I think is interesting, is the whole economic model and the thrust of academia has largely been the same for hundreds of years. Really, literally hundreds of years since, and really the model has not changed very much. But in the next 20 years, I suspect the model will change more than in the last 100 years. And so that's a very exciting time, which means, for example, newer players have an opportunity, right? So the dynamism in the educational sector is changing, I think, quite rapidly, which is, I think, is opportunity for newer players.
As far as I understand, you define Széchenyi István University as a newer player and a growing university.
Yeah.
However,
yes.
So there are still 8 million students who are studying outside their home countries, and half of them are choosing English-speaking countries. Correct. And the other half of them are also choosing capital cities. So as non-native speakers, as a non-capital city, you're and a STEM university, a newcomer, a latecomer, with a growing university. What is your advice for us? So how should we position ourselves? And what are your major suggestions for us for the coming 20 years?
Yeah, so I would say I have three suggestions. One is, traditionally, let's say for international students, the major issue is comfort. I guess risk. Yeah. So English-speaking entities have traditionally been seen as less risk, and so the U.S. and the U.K. gets a lot of course, international students. And that's real. I think for the people that you want to have physically come here, making it easier and easier for them to be comfortable with the fact that they will be comfortable here is an important piece. And there's two ways to look at the international or attracting international students. One is the traditional way, and which is the way, let's say, the U.S. and U.K. That has succeeded, is an extremely large branding strategy, right? So hundreds of years of branding, So that is very, very difficult to build. It's very expensive. Anybody that wants to sell into the traditional consumer space knows that. So if you're new, quote new, and you have a new approach, then getting focused is, I think, very, very important. And so the second thing I would suggest is deeper partnership with international schools, universities, where there is a more straightforward pathways here from other locales, right? And this is typically, and these connections can be physical connections, but they can also be virtual connections. So that's the second thing. And this is not really explored by I'll say, your competitors, right? Because they have had this branding advantage. But on the other hand, if you can build pathways and partnerships with other institutions on the international realm from which you want to recruit, that's a way of bypassing this branding advantage. And I think the third thing is, as I said, that the world is changing in terms of how education is delivered. As I mentioned when I started my comments, the fundamental model of education hasn't really changed since the 1800s, which is the classroom model. But the model also has requirements. You need physical infrastructure. You need to have the teacher there physically. That's not. I think what I would be looking at is what are the newer models that can be enabled and scaled, and that's a way to I think bypass the perceived disadvantages of the existing model, right? So I think really being cognizant of how technology especially is changing education and reach, and then leveraging those for the directions you want to go. I think I would very much advise thinking thoughtfully about that. And this includes, by the way, things like professional education. This is past typical graduation. There are large workforce challenges that exist in most society, I think, including in Hungary, and the educational sector is very important in that. So, yeah,
the master-disciple nature of education will change, because I'm asking because education doesn't only convey knowledge; it also conveys character. So basically, the professor is also a role model. So this is why I'm asking if technology could substitute.
Not substitute. So I will describe what I think will happen, and I guess we'll see what will happen. So there's two ideas that sort of are prevalent in the current educational paradigm. There's the master-disciple, but in this master-disciple, let me fragment what the master does. So the master, on the one hand, provides the I'll say the actual knowledge. right? Going back to I'll change it to physics. They know physics. So you have to somehow transmit the knowledge of physics to the disciple, right? That is one level of what the master does. The second level of what the master does is motivation, okay? Perhaps inspiration, right? So that's a second level. The third level of what the master does maybe is providing urgency. So that the disciple actually moves and does stuff, right? So what I see happening is that those three worlds of what the master does and did are fracturing and specializing. Okay, so today I'll say as you get more and more into the world of the education is about the actual subject. That is the place where technology pieces become more and more useful and perhaps even substitutive, right? So in some sense, if you looked at the master part of it, the actual subject matter side, in some sense, is reduced in value. I don't want to overemphasize that fact, but it is available elsewhere. But the other aspects become more important. So the coaching becomes more important, the motivation becomes more important, but perhaps it can be specialized. So I've seen models where you actually separate these tasks. Yeah, we have the sports analogy where coaches, don't necessarily need to be they don't need to be experts in the field. They need to know how to coach. So what I see happening over time is, I'll say, the human connected aspects of teaching, the master, as it were, will become more emphasized, but perhaps become specialized, and the subject matter connected aspects will probably be much more technologically connected. And we see that happening in the large online platforms. We sort of see that kind of trend.
And what about location?
Location can matter. Location has a lot of things tied to it. It has sort of cultural connections. It has the sense of teamwork and things like that. So location can matter. I want you to imagine and you're a administrator for a large physically connected institution. I want you to imagine the world difference between what you're running and a large online platform, right? And the president of that platform, or like I'll say somebody like Western governor or something like that. They have their own problems, but let's say the problems they don't have. They don't have problems of physical safety. They don't have to worry about physical safety. It's not part of the purview, right? Largely speaking, they don't have issues with scheduling and maintenance and physical asset debts and things like that, right? So these two worlds have, I would say, they're both advantages and disadvantages. But what's also clear is this world is scaling right now. Yeah.
Actually, I think that the university also serves as a place for social network and social capital. Yeah. In the end, is this going to be lost?
I would say one retort would be, maybe it serves as a place where you don't build the skills for how you build social connections without the institutional structure of a place like a university. So if you leave, you're in the quote real world. How do you build social connections? And typically, there are skills you have to build to do that. You have, common interests. You have to engage with society. Nobody's putting on potlucks and other things for you. You have to. So there's one retort is, okay, it's good. It does that, but what about next? What is it? What it's not really preparing you for afterwards, right? In that sense. So that's one side, but the other side is on the online side. Let me tell you sort of the experience that I was told by the Georgia Tech people. So Georgia Tech has a very, very successful master's online program, and they worried about this issue. that what about the social connectedness? And they found independent of what Georgia Tech did, the students themselves built online platforms where they could interact with each other. After the class was finished, after even the master's program was finished, they continued to maintain these at a higher rate than their physical counterparts. Here, there's no drop-off because you're continuing on the same platforms, right? My real response to you is, I think we have thought, maybe I'll agree on this, we have thought of universities largely as knowledge centers, where the knowledge is the emphasis point, right? Whether it's technical knowledge or knowledge of the world, whatever. I just wonder if because in essence, because of technology, knowledge to some degree is commoditized, right? In the way that we've just discussed, right? So maybe the real, of course, value of universities, whether it's virtual or physical, and both are kind of going, is this notion of more enduring qualities and connections you want to make, and either teaching you how to do that, or providing the mechanism for you to connect with other people, right? We typically, when we think of universities, we think of them from the youth to a certain point of age. I think the role of universities as the second tier, because what that means is there'll be many pivot points. It's kind of, I think it'll be very unusual for people to be in the same career for 50 years, 60 years. So universities are I think increasingly interesting as you go through some part of the career and you want to pivot. And people already do this with engineers taking MBAs and other things. But I think the vision of what the universities can do over a period of time probably needs to extend to, I'll say there's a second tier and a third tier pivot point where people come back. And again, going back to where I think universities will go, I think it's, one of the things I've talked about is maybe universities should provide a subscription model, right? A lifelong subscription model. If you come in, you do something for a while, you leave, and then you come back and you want to repivot to another career, this kind of thing. But I think this repivoting is something else which is very important. I mean, just in this area, we have automotive. Of course, the repivot everybody in automotive is thinking about is how do we go from ICE engines, ICE cars to internal combustion engine cars, to electric, to now, to autonomy. Yeah, as a central pivot point for society.
As far as I understand, you are suggesting that on one hand, universities are responsible for the path dependency as well as lifelong learning, and these are the re-pivot points.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got one last question for you. So what is your major takeaway message for yourself from Hungary?
I think it's a very, very interesting place. What I personally like to engage on are places that are on the move, if I can put it that way. The places that have already made it, you often find that, you get this sort of attitude of complacency, right? I've worked for a lot of companies that are in the firm. You can even institutions that are. So what happens is they're not open to new ideas, and not as a sort of a, I guess as a research person or a startup person, I look for situations where there is a potential for movement. Right, there's a potential for, and in that sense, Hungary is quite interesting. There's a lot of potential. That's kind of the way I look at it. And just as a contrast, if you look at the major centers in Europe, in many ways, they have so much mass. And they have so much associated bureaucracy that it's hard to see a lot of rapid movement there, where it's seemingly possible to see it here. And that's my big takeaway. Oh, it's kind of interesting. And as I think I've told you this before, like as a university, really it reminds me of my old university, Carnegie Mellon, in the late 1970s, when it was a small place, much like this, and not grown to what it has grown to now. And you sort of have a similar energy, you know, sort of things are moving, you know, it's not, people are vying for something, right? So, which is always good. So that's my takeaway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
It has been splendid. Thank you. Thank you.